Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Governance Around the World series. It's really lovely to have everybody here and to have our colleagues from Malaysia in the room with us. So today we're going to be talking about governance in Malaysia, and we've got some experts with us from the MACD as well as Dr. K.M. Loy. I've been very fortunate to have known K.M. For quite a while now, as we were co-editors and we were involved in the development of ISO 37000, the governance of organization standard. So without any further ado, I'm going to first of all hand over to Dr. Loy to introduce governance in Malaysia for us.
Thank you, Carol. Let me share my slide. All right, so, okay. Good morning, good afternoons, and evening, ladies and gentlemen out there. My name is Loy, K.M. Loy. I'm representing an organization by the name called the ABMS Malaysia, which is the Association of Anti-Bribery Management System Practitioners Malaysia. So I'm very much honored to be invited by the Good Governance Academic to share some thoughts on this governance in Malaysia. Yeah, a quick background about myself. I've been involved in the manufacturing industry for more than 15 years. I'm also represent Malaysia in most of these management system standards, starting from ISO 9000, 14000, social responsibility 26000, and recently for the last 5-6 years, I've been involved in this technical committee 309, which is called the governance of organization, covering ISO 37001, the anti-bribery management system, and also whistleblowing management system, and new others work item as well. My involvement especially has been in anti-corruption advocacy since the year 2000. Yeah, so this is a little bit background about myself. Well, if you realize that in Malaysia, as early as 2008, the Securities Commission of Malaysia has requested the public listed company to submit the CSR report, and it has been made mandatory since then in the year 2007. Yeah, and among the important requests or requirement under this CSR reporting is to describe the CSR activities and practices that is undertaken by this public listed company. Since then, after the year 2016, the Securities Commission has requested the public listed company now to submit what we call a sustainability report. And this sustainability report framework is actually trying to present or help the organization to present their reach out on the environmental, social, and also the economic perspective of it. And today, most of us realize that there's a new buzzword called ESG, environmental social governance, and it becomes such a fast-moving trend that our Bursa Malaysia is also now looking and requesting most of the public listed company to go into this ESG reporting as well. Yeah, and some of these requirements, perhaps under this sustainability reporting, is to improve the quality of sustainability related practices and reporting, and also to support that with a big focus on this sustainability and the capital market as well. Okay. Now, most of the public listed companies are required to address this corporate governance, and in Malaysia, the authority has come up with a guidance called the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance in the year 2021. Similarly, other countries, for example, UK do have their corporate governance code. Singapore has the Code of Corporate Governance, and the basic principle is actually to address the corporate governance in this perspective. The board of the role of the board, the compensation, strategic oversight, and most importantly, the risk management aspect of it. So along with this, most of these organizations in the country have their own code of conduct on corporate governance. At the international level, the ISO PC 309 has actually published this international standard known as the ISO 37000, the governance of organization. And this is actually one of the most important useful management document to be for organization to adopt and use it. And I explain a little bit further later. And as I mentioned, Malaysia, most public listed companies are required to address this corporate governance using this code. And this code of conduct actually has been revised for the last 6 years. The last revision was, of course, in the year 2021, and that was the previous revision in the year 2017. The rationale behind it, why there was a revision in the year 2021, because Malaysia passed a Section 17 Capital A corporate liability provision in the year 2018, and it was enforced in the year June 2020. And naturally, the public listed company or the Bursa Malaysia decided that they should revise this code of corporate governance to help and assist the entity to address these two important policies, which is actually the anti-corruption and the whistleblowing mechanism. I mean, these are the two important, but of course, the other code of conduct on corporate governance are also equally important, and is all spelled out. One of the other two speakers will probably spending some time to talk about this corporate governance by the SC. So this is the code on the corporate governance, which SC has developed basically to ensure broad leadership and effectiveness, effective audit and risk management, and also to ensure integrity in reporting, the corporate reporting. Yeah. And as I said earlier, the ISO had developed this standard called the 37,000 governance of organization. We have spent many man-hours developing this standard. Usually a standard probably takes 3 years. And for this standard, we took more than 3 years and published this about 46-page document. And this document, to me, I think is a very useful document for all entities to use this as a guidance, and also to help you to enhance on what is this corporate governance is about. We developed this principle, 5 important principles: purpose, the value generation, strategy, oversight, and the accountability. And we allow this principle enabling these activities to engage the stakeholders. What we want to need to know more about the leadership. What are the decisions and the data analysis to help us to make the right decision? Risk governance, social responsibility, and sustainability. And the outcome of this implementation of this governance of the organization is purely effective performance, responsible stewardship, and ethical behavior. And now today, as you know, it's not only CSR, but of course, the ESG has become a buzzword, as I mentioned, way back from the year 2005 and 2006. So it was Kofi Annan, the UN secretary then, coined this word and used it, this ESG. And today, we are all very puzzled and equally attentive to this word ESG as well. So what is this ESG? Now, basically, ESG represents an organization effort to address these 3 important areas: environmental, social, and governance. As you know, that environmental focus on environmental concerns such as climate change and also impact of their product on the living world, whereas the social aspect covers the working environment, fair workplace with healthy and safety and employee relationship. And today, this silent G is the most tricky part. And a lot of people talk, what is this G? Well, a lot of us think that it covers the board quality, but it's more than that. It also covers the compensation, anti-bribery, and also speak-up mechanism, quality, and diversity. Now, let us talk a little bit more. What is this G? Now, this governance in this G is actually something that is beyond some of us thinking that when we implement ESG, it's just environmental and social. Now, this governance is something that shows us about what the stakeholders should do. Yeah, it's also related to how the corporate use this governance to establish. Basically, when Gandhi's definition was the trusteeship obligation inherent in the company's operation, where assets and resources are pooled and entrusted to the manager for an optimal utilization of the stakeholders' interest. And basically today we talk about this governance. We are trying to address 4 important principles, which is accountability, transparency, fairness, and responsibility for the best of the interests of stakeholders, shareholders, and also the business as a whole. So this is what some of us believe, that this is a G, which is now beyond just board of directors required. Now, I do not want to emphasize so much what are these environmental and social framework, which has been publicized quite a lot. But this G, governance, certain organization, even certain initial organization may start to embark on this governance, they adopt this model called the Robeco's SAM model, which covers 8 important areas: governance, code of business conduct, risk and crisis management, supply chain management, tax strategy, materiality, policy influences, and also impact measurement and valuation. But today, some organization who embark on ESG has go beyond this board of directors qualities and also the diversity. I want to share with you some of this approach that the governance index or the governance sustainability index are being used. For example, of course, governance, composition of the board, the governing board, quality as well, the independent directors, their remuneration, occupational discrimination, beneficial ownership. Today, a lot of countries have set up this requirement, this law on the beneficial ownership. I think this is something that we need to report. Corporate integrity, prevention of corruption, and whistleblowing policy. Anti-corruption or anti-competitive practices code. And these are some of these areas which embark on the requirement under the ESG. Now, most of us heard of this GRI. GRI is one of these ESG framework, and they also have come out at least seven standards related to government, and some of them are the economic performance, market presence, indirect economic impact, procurement practices, anti-corruption, anti-competitive behavior, and tax. So today in Malaysia, I think some of these organizations are using the GRI because as much as 53% of these companies who report doing sustainability report are using this GRI as well. But what I'm trying to stretch is that these are some elements which governance in Malaysia are being used by some of these companies. But beyond that, I also like to emphasize some organization, for example, this company called Cape EMS Berhad, believe that they are embarking on this ESG, but the area focus are based on these 3 principles. Environmental sustainability talks about their workplace, but with the health, safety, security, and environmental practices. Sustainability, social sustainability, it covers the fair labors and environmental practices. And under the governance, sustainability basically focus on fair business practice. So this organization, for example, under the governance sustainability index itself, they place some important area which to address fair business practice. One of them, fair competition is very important when if we are going to do business, but also to ensure fair competition and antitrust law is addressed. If you are a public listed company, inside trading is important. Code for inside trading has to be ensured that they do not jeopardize this requirement. Being a public listed company, you have to ensure timely and correct reporting. So financial and business record is important to address in a timely and also correct manner. Ensure financial integrity so that we have a proper tax and also a trade control. So we have to be careful whether it's a tax avoidance or tax evasion. So most of these organizations in Malaysia, we have, after having this Section 17, Capital A, corporate liability provision, most of the organizations have to address this bribery, which include anti-money laundering, bribery and facility payment, gift and hospitality, charitable donation, and political contribution. So most of us need to be alert, especially with the political activities and lobbying. By the way, Malaysia, we are going for our general election this Saturday on November the 19th. So a lot of issues have been brought out to the attention about political activities and lobbying as well. Now, I want to say a little bit about money laundering. Most of these organizations, for example, this company, they have actually put in place some guidance about what to do, what to report if there is a suspicious transaction, reporting and need to be carried out. And these are some of the proper governance that I think need to be addressed. Conflict of interest, fraud, breach of trust, and abuse of power. So they are equally important that for a company to ensure governance, proper governance, they have to address this abuse of power and also the breach of trust as well. Fair purchasing, and this is where I think the whole down this whole supply chain is very important. We have to ensure a fair business, fair purchasing, select the right supply chain business associate that can help you and also to participate and support you in this journey towards governance and also the anti-bribery program. Having a code of conduct and also business ethics is important. Yeah, and of course today going beyond the IT is cyber security protection, not only personal but also company devices. There are rules, there are requirements now about company devices. And also lastly, I think most importantly is the privacy, data protection, and the confidential or the IP proprietary information that we have to secure. And also not only that, we have to ensure that this important information are not leaked out and also being used by others. So to me, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is one of the few important government framework in Malaysia and towards a new perspective of governance in the ESG, what is need to be spelled out in this governance in the ESG perspective. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. I have give you a brief thought, about my thought on this governance in ESG, especially in Malaysia, and I'm also looking forward to this session on getting feedback under the Q&A. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Loy, for a great overview in terms of governance and context and the silent G in ESG, as you say. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to hand over now to Renu Chandrasegaram. Thank you so much. Renu is the chair of the professional development for the MACD. And today we also have online Paul Chan, who's you're the CEO, president, founder of the Malaysian. All of the above. Thank you. And Paul is also very involved in the Global Network of Directors Institutes. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Renu to give us a context from a directors and a governance perspective. Thank you.
Thank
You've
you
also got
so
slides.
much, Carolyn. Thank you. I've also got slides. Yes, thank you so much, Carolyn, and thank you so much to the Good Governance Academy for inviting me for today's session. I've just got about 10 to 12 minutes to share with you, everyone, on my area. Just give me a moment. I hope you can all see the slides. Hey. Right. Okay. Let me quickly say a little bit about myself. I'm the Chair of Professional Development and a faculty member of MACD. I'm also in the Policy Committee of the Global Network of Director Institutes, GNDI, as well as the CEO and Principal Consultant of RC Compliance Consultancy, and together with MACD today. So it's a little bit about myself. I consult with many major organizations on corporate liability, on ISO 37001, anti-corruption, providing advisory on corruption risk assessment, ESG, and training and awareness. So that's a little bit about myself. Let me start by giving you from the highest regulator, really the regulatory perspective on corporate governance. Here we can see we have the Securities Commission of Malaysia, which is the governing body as the regulator that regulates the capital market and regulates the stock exchange of Malaysia, which in turn regulates public listed companies. The Securities Commission came out with the Corporate Governance Strategic Priorities 2021-2023. So it was a part of the Capital Market Master Plan of the Securities Commission. When these corporate governance priorities came out, it was for this 3-year period to govern listed companies and capital market players, as well as those that govern the organizations themselves, them being the directors. So in this sense, there are 5 main thrusts of the CG, we call it the CG priorities. It's designed to support listed companies in responding to the rise in a stakeholder economy. So it's not so much on profitability or making profits, but rather focusing on the needs of the stakeholder. And in that sense, the 5 key thrusts of the CG priorities are on board leadership, ESG fitness of the board, and we've heard Dr. Loy speaking about ESG requirements, and you've seen the breadth and depth of it. Here, what the CG strategic priorities require is that the board of directors have capacity in actually providing ESG knowledge and to ensure that they are actually fit to oversee the enhanced reporting framework. On 3, it supports investor stewardship and engagement. There's strategic trust 4. This is on digital tools to enhance the CG transparency, corporate governance transparency, to widen public access to corporate governance data, to ensure leading back to this transparency and deepen engagement with the youth on corporate governance, enriching academic studies, as well as youth exposure. Now, when we talk about strengthening board leadership for agile responsibilities, strengthening ESG fitness of the boards, I would like to talk a little bit about ESG fitness of the board and what exactly with respect to these priorities is about. In these strategic trusts, each of them have got several initiatives. This priority 2, which is this one, ESG fitness of the board, priority 2 develops 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. 2.1 was really on leading the impact program for board capacity to ensure that they build their capacity on sustainability. A board could have capacity in finance, maybe in human resource, they could have in management, but are they strong enough as far as ESG oversight is concerned? Capacity building on sustainability for boards of middle and small cap companies. Large cap companies are capitalization companies being 2 billion and above, Malaysia 2 billion and above, they seem to have much stronger, more robust ESG frameworks in place. So here in this 2.2 initiative is really on the boards of middle as well as small cap companies. And really small cap companies are those that were previously large SMEs, small and medium enterprises, which then later went to obtain listing on the board. So they would be small cap companies in this respect. And finally, on 2.3, it's enhancing transparency on the sustainability practices of listed companies. This is very critical because very recently, in line with enhancing the transparency of listed companies, part of it was that the Bursa Malaysia, which is the stock exchange of Malaysia, had to develop after a period of exposure draft, after a period of obtaining feedback from directors, from public listed companies, from company secretaries, and all interested stakeholders and parties, including academicians. Subsequent to receiving that feedback, the Bursa Malaysia, or the Malaysian Stock Exchange, the Malaysian Bourse, actually amended the listing requirements in order to provide greater transparency on the sustainability practices of listed issuers. We'll go into that later, a little bit later in today's presentation. So I'm conscious of the time. So let me quickly talk to you about Bursa Malaysia, PLC, Public Listed Companies Transformation Program. Now, this is a guidance to PLCs. It's all part of corporate governance. It's to ensure that PLC has that link between sustainability and long-term value creation, and to ensure that they have a well-defined ESG response. And it's so critical on the G part, the governance part. So the emphasis is placed on implementing the E, the S, and the G as a company-wide approach, and not just focused on the holding company or say corporate office, but rather if you have tentacles as a listed company throughout the world, that's even more necessary for you to have a company-wide approach. So this is really a guidance at a PLC transformation program. Now, what I'd like to highlight here is that in this, it says here in Malaysia, 94% of the top 50 PLCs have the ESG strategies. However, only 62% embed them in the business strategies, and only 17% of them, this is critical, 17% of them have them actually assured, whether it's externally assured. And finally, 15% of that under labor relations, this is under the S. So this part on the external assurance, due to all of this, later, the Bursa has come out with the amendments to the listing requirements to ensure greater transparency. So when we look at the PLC, public listed companies, and the listed issuers transformation program, governance is a core element of ESG, which Dr. Loy has gone to in very much detail, but just to highlight a little bit more, a little bit on it: board independence, risk management, compliance, corporate governance, anti-money laundering, anti-bribery, corruption, cybersecurity, ethics, all of them falling under the pillar of G. And in this, the governance context of ESG, we got to look at it two-pronged: corporate governance and sustainability governance. So the ESG response under corporate governance would be, how does a company manage its governance topics, these governance topics? To be very clear, in a sustainability statement, state clearly, as far as the regulator is concerned, to state clearly how have you managed these governance topics, like ethics, like fraud, like compliance, anti-bribery, anti-corruption. And sustainability governance is, how do you manage the overall sustainability response, the ESG response? And that too has to be stated. So the guidance is provided, linking sustainability with a value creation, as well as providing this a follow-on. As a follow-on from that, Bursa Malaysia amended the listing requirements on the 26th of September. It's now published. It enhances, provides the enhanced sustainability reporting framework. And one important aspect is when a sustainability statement is actually published by a listed issuer, starting from the financial year ended 31st December 2023, that is just next year, starting from the end of next year, all sustainability statements must have an added statement called ESG assurance. That means you have to state whether or not your statement has been reviewed by your internal auditor, or you have had an external assurance aligned with some recognized assurance standards. And Dr. Loy has stated on GRI. However, under the Bursa amendments, they require for a focal point on TCFD, Task Force for Climate Disclosure, particularly on climate disclosure requirements. Now, why do we need this? In addition to having that assurance on the sustainability statement, whoever gives that assurance must also disclose the conclusions. It is really to enhance the credibility. And some very material 10 common sustainability matters across all sectors, regardless of what sector your particular PLC is in. There are 10 common matters which you must disclose according to regulator. These I've only provided an extract. There are 10 of them, but if you read through them, you will find that at the top is on anti-corruption. And this is one of the governance pillars. Anti-corruption is so important. The common indicator which you have to disclose over a 3-year period. What's the percentage of employees that have received training on anti-corruption by employee category? Percentage of operations assessed for corruption-related risks, which means you need to conduct corruption risk assessment in your organization. And what are the confirmed incidences of corruptions, as well as the actions that you've taken as an organization. That means having that kind of whistleblowing mechanism and also investigations, internal verification, validation, investigations, corporate-wise, and then disclose it. So we can't really run away as far as the regulators are concerned. Now, where does that actually flow from? As has been touched earlier, the National Anti-Corruption Plan of Malaysia, the NACP 2019-2023, the vision was to ensure that Malaysia is a corrupt-free nation, and the mission is to know that Malaysia is known for her integrity and not corruption. Therefore, the Section 17 capital A of the MACC Act was then developed and promulgated 2018, enforced 2020. It's specifically offenses for commercial organizations, corruption offenses on that, whereby the penalty would be for directors facing a possible jail term up to 20 years and a company facing a minimum fine upon prosecution, upon conviction, minimum fine of 1 million ringgit and not USD. And with that, I've come to the end of my particular session today. Thank you very much for your attention, and over to you. Over to you, Caroline. So I'm just going to stop sharing screen now.
Thank you so much, Renu. I had a bit of noise in the background, but it was really a very insightful presentation. Thank you. And just to everyone online, the presentation is available online now for downloading. So thank you very much. Thank you, Renu. You're going to share your screen now. You can introduce Paul.
Oh, I'm sorry, Caroline, you had the background noise. I'm so sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. Just to introduce Paul now. Paul, thank you so much for being with us. We are honored to have you here today. I believe you're going to share some thoughts with us in this regard as well. And then we'll move over to questions and answers from the audience. Thank you. Sorry, Paul, you're still on mute.
The mic is on mute.
Well, I think you're on mute.
They inform Paul to unmute the mic.
There, you're unmuted now. Yes, we can. Thank you, Paul.
You muted me now. Okay, sorry. Okay, you see my screen?
Yes, it's very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me go back to the beginning. Yeah, just a brief introduction of myself. My name is Paul Chan. I'm the president of the Malaysian Alliance of Corporate Directors. It's a pro bono service. I'm not a CEO, although I run as a CEO. I am actually a practicing corporate director. I serve on a few of the public and private boards, and for the last almost 20 years. So I thought the best way to learn more is to share with other people what I have experienced. Every one of us has different experience and different environment. So I've been the president of Malaysian Alliance of Corporate Directors. I'm very much involved with the Global Network of Director Institute, as well as the ambassador for IRC, that's integrated reporting. In fact, recently they formed an organization called IRCC. They're trying to get integrated reporting all integrated into a cohesive report, right? And they call IR, that is Integrated Reporting Connectivity Council, to integrate everything into one. Let me see how I get rid of this. Okay. Now, I'm an accountant by training, by profession. I am a chartered accountant, also a fellow of this CPA Australia. Right. So I look at from this point of view, from the accountant perspective, because accountant's role now has literally expanded to such an extent to cover quite a large area, not just financial. And that is also a responsibility of the board of directors as well. As directors, we are not just looking to governance internally, but also broaden the scope. All right. Now, I present this to you is that this is a reality today, right? In 1975, you notice that the large part of the company's value, right, is on tangible assets. In other words, there's a transactional assets that you can record in the financial statements. But today, 45 years later, they found that the large part of the value of the company are intangible, and only tangible assets are reflected in the balance sheet. Now, that is where I challenge my own fraternity that the accountants must also wake up, because we don't take in intangible assets into the balance sheet. It's not reflected in the financial statement. So to an extent that sometimes they look at the financial statement, we do not fully see the whole picture of how the company fare in performance, right? I met up with this interesting.
Sorry, Paul, just to interrupt. If you could maybe put your sound up a little bit. I think people are having a problem hearing you clearly. All right. Sorry, yes, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, okay, much better. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So in 2016, I came across this book called The End of Accounting. It's written by Professor Baruch Love and Associate Professor Feng Wei. I had the opportunity to meet up with Professor Love 3 years ago in New York, and a good conversation with him about how we come up with this accounting title that's very provoking to many accountants, right? The End of Accounting. Basically, he's not talking about the end of accounting, it's not important, but the accounting reporting framework could be expanded. For example, it's such a, in the old days, just like I showed you the chart that shows that the accounting financial reporting is only now on average we assured only 10% of the physical assets. All right, 90% of value of the company is intangible. So we come up to this conclusion is that if we do not recognize the capital that we invested in non-tangible assets, we are missing the whole point. If I give you a very profound answer is that, for example, that nobody will compete, nobody will complain, or nobody will sort of ignore the fact that investment in human capital is paramount in today's market. Or everybody are looking towards human capital investment. All right, but where does human capital comes to? In the financial balance sheet, in the P&L account, the more you invest in human capital, the worse it performs. So it doesn't make sense. So we talk about all these issues, and I've summarized this issue for us to see that so important for us to review and relook and even reinvent the accounting profession, right? Now, the issue of sustainability came into play, as you heard from the previous two speakers. It is really coming into a very much forefront now, all right? What is sustainability here? Sustainable development is development which meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's what definition by the World Commission of the Environment and Development, right? Now we come to ESG, which we talk so much about. Now, although directors' responsibility overall in governance traditionally has been internal composition of the board and so on and so forth, but now expanded to a bigger role. That ESG element that covers environmental aspect, the social aspect, the governance aspect of the company that existing in the environment they're operating in, right? And ESG has been developed to such an extent that the regulators has come up with the various framework, the ISB's framework, the EU taxonomy framework, the FDR, SFD framework at the top, right? And that filters down to various standards of reporting framework, which cover GRI, ISO, CDP, CDSB, IRC, value reporting, and so on, right? To meet the global goals, which is set by the United Nations and also by World Economic Forum on sustainable development goals, the greenhouse gas protocol, the SDG or social development goal, and so on, right? Just now, Dr. Loy was talking about the ISO 37000. This has been adopted, the international benchmark for G. And in South Africa, the King 4 is applicable to South Africa. It was published in 2016 and now become an international standard. This is one of the standards beside and beyond all the other standards we're talking about, right? This is well covered by Professor Dr. Loy. Okay. So you look at it from the board perspective, there's so many proliferation of reporting standards to an extent that sometimes we wonder whether most of our energy is really rightfully deployed in creating value for the company, or is it that we are just in compliance with the regulators, right? So there's so many different sort of framework that come into play. Integral reporting has come up with their own framework and incorporate this into meet the SDG goal as well. At the same time, what integral reporting come up with is that we are talking about integrated value creation with integrated thinking strategy. Now, whatever that we do at the end of the day, the company must perform. So the outcome of what we do has got to be measurable. It's got to be add value to the whole business that the company is operating within, without eroding the environment, or without disadvantaging the workers and social issue and so on, right? So to give you some comparison of what are all these standards aiming for, you have the GRI, which is most well adopted because they started very beginning. The one who is leading the standards, GRI, or Global Reporting Initiative. The Sustainability Accounting Standard Board, they also come up with a standard. They have developed 77 different frameworks for different industries because there's no one size fits all, right? Then the United Nations has come up with the United Nations SDG, right? They call it the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, TCFD, just I mentioned very briefly, Task Force on Climate Disclosure, Financial Disclosure, has come to the forefront. Even as we speak now, there is a meeting in Egypt at COP27. They're addressing all this issue, and climate issues are put right to the forefront of all this reporting. So you see that the market, the world has been changing so rapidly, right? That we can hardly catch up with all these various standards, right? This year, you know that the COP26 announced that the IFRS should develop a global baseline standard. And the IFRS, together with VRF, the Value Reporting Foundation, right, to develop the system global baseline standard, supposedly to be out this year, before the end of the year. But looks like it's going to be delayed until probably the first quarter, if not the first half of next year, right? So under the IFRS Foundation, which is under IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, together with the International Accounting Standard Board, right? They formed this organization called ISSB, or International Sustainability Standard Board, which is made up of VRF and Integral Reporting together with the CDSB, right? Climate Disclosure Standard Board. They try to harmonize the whole system, harmonize the whole corporate reporting system. So today, both integral reporting and value reporting are under ISSB together with CDP, okay? And this is where it comes into. TCFD under World Economic Forum and recognized by ISCO, the International Organization for Securities Commission, are moving towards this kind of standard, ISSB standard, right? Now, you know, the ISCO has adopted the IFRS globally, okay? So I reckon that by the time we adopt ISSB, we will be probably adopting this global baseline standard for capital markets around the world, right? What was this reporting all about, the climate crisis? In COP26, this was addressed to call the countries, have the countries to reach a net zero by 2050, right? And keep the global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius and protect the ecosystem and habitats. Mobilize finance. Now, this is where the incentive of incorporating this sustainable reporting into the company financials, all right? Because this is where the financial institution will be evaluating the company, whether they are qualified to be supported financially to green bonds and all these things, you know, and collaboration with other organizations to achieve that. So even as we speak now, today, 18th of November, they're still talking about it. COP27 now, they talk about reducing emission, which is actually related to climate. So that's why TCFD is pushed to the forefront, helping countries to prepare for and deal with climate change. As you're aware, the climate today has already disrupted a lot of businesses, right? So board of directors must be sensitive about all these things that's developing, otherwise an impact into the value creation of the company. And then securing technical support and funding developing countries for all these above. This is the element of reporting under TCFD. Right? In your corporate reporting, you cover areas like governance, strategy, risk management, which I've covered before by Reno and also Dr. Loy. Okay, and the last part is risk management. Actually, is part of board responsibility, but now extending to managing climate as well, climate related risks as well, and then the matrices and targets. Now, this is one of the most sort of challenging part to measure objectively the target. In Malaysia, our chairman of the stock exchange has already declared that companies that ignore ESG will be deprived of equity and debt financing. Our central bank has come up with a taxonomy also to qualify borrowers to meet this kind of a target, ESG target. Right? So many financial institutions have already mobilized funds for sustainable finance. What is sustainable finance here? Basically, actually, finance, financial resources set aside for companies that comply with the ESG standard. That is where it's coming from, right? You look at it, there's so many different types of standard. How do we begin as the board of directors? I've been in touch with this organization, the ESG Exchange. They're developing a playbook, so to say, for sustainable reporting. The mandatory reporting, it will become mandatory eventually, all right, for sustainable reporting by companies around the world. So that there is a comparability, there is a benchmarking, there is a, let me say, assurable framework of compliance, right? So the exchange has come up with something, I know they call it international consensus on how to create sustainable reports. So there is a format, or there is a benchmarking against, for example, delivery to global collaboration with standard setters, with regulators, with accountants, with director institutes and corporates, as well as industry certification body. So here you have the resources for corporate directors, for in corporate reporting, for IFRS financial reporting, ISSB sustainability report, as well as corporate readiness, data, how to get the data, assurance, integrity report, and so on. Right. So this is the knowledge exchange, all right, for implementation. I won't go to the detail of it. There's a lot of details in gathering data, in analyzing data, using technology, and also there's a program also to certify as international certification to benchmark against those who are preparing for the ESG reporting, right? And also preparing the assurance, independent assurance, to assure that the reporting is what they say it is. So this is a process the exchange has come up with, the 5 modules playbook provided to provides clear and concise how-tos. Right? Data and technology is one module, operational processes, business analytics, auditable project report, production, and repeatability and refinement. So we are all entering a new frontier, and in this new frontier, there's so many of the moving parts. Sometimes we're so confused. We're trying to distill it down to a global baseline standard. That is where the ISSB is trying to achieve. And this program is in compliance, or rather in alignment with ISSB standard. So this is a very brief presentation, and if there's any question, I would be glad to take the question. All right. Thank you very much, Caroline. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. And thank you, Dr. Loy and Renu. I think we can open up for questions now. If there's anyone who has any questions, we've got lots of comments. I think the one question I have is in terms of the adoption of the Malaysian standards, and perhaps this is to you, Dr. Loy, in terms of the adoption of the standards in Malaysia. Is it just, the large listers, or do you see there is a need or a want or desire to follow corporate governance principles by organizations that are bigger than just the large listed?
Thanks.
I mean, bigger,
Caroline.
smaller. Sorry. Yes.
Yes. As I mentioned earlier, the ISO 37000, which is the governance of organization, is actually one very useful standard or document, which all stakeholders, whether it is the large or medium or even SME, can use it as a management tool to help them to address this corporate governance in their organization. Remember, we spent more than 4 years, you and me spent more than 4 years debating and developing this standard, designing standards, so that we really put in a lot of effort and cross-zitting all these reference documents and make sure that this is one of the useful tools, a document that can be used across all the stakeholders. And I think it's a very important document. Sadly, Malaysia we have not adopted into our Malaysian standard yet. What I'm trying to say is that Malaysia has adopted the ISO 37001, which is the anti-bribery management system, and also the ISO 37002, which is the whistleblowing management system, and adopt it as equivalent under the Malaysian standard. And I believe this is also an important document. I strongly urge that perhaps the authorities and the various stakeholders come forward and push the authorities like Department of Standards Malaysia, the BUSA, and the others agency to use this document as handy as it is. After all, these standards are reference and guidance, and they are not mandatory documents to be used. So I would strongly urge that, yes, a lot of like-minded men, people put out in their many hours and many days to develop this standard, and this is no doubt a very good standard for start to use to establish governance in an organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Loy. I have a question for you, Renu. In your programs that you develop, is it mainly for large listed entities, or do you find that directors are looking for, in Malaysia specifically, are looking for development in the smaller entities or various other different types of organizations?
I would say that most of the programs are geared towards the larger entities. The smaller organizations are also required, although there's no mandatory requirements in that sense, but yes, they do reach out for assistance. And there is as well for SMEs that kind of guidance on ESG. Of course, it's not as comprehensive as what the regulators have given, because they're, the smaller companies, the SMEs are not required, are not mandated. But those that adopt the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they have been provided with guidance on how to implement it on a much smaller scale within their organization. So yes, although I do target more towards the larger companies, the PLCs, I also assist the smaller organizations. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe just to carry on from that, when you do the training, what are the main areas of concern do you find that directors have in Malaysia in terms of understanding in their corporate governance role?
I would think one of the critical part, because regulators require PLCs to write out the sustainability statement. One problem is greenwashing, and rather just adhering to the letter of the law, but not its spirit. So another problem that they also have is, another issue that directors also have is on obtaining the kind of metrics that is required to be revealed or required to be put into the statements. That becomes an issue as well.
Dr. Loy, from your perspective, are you seeing, are you providing guidance in terms of that missing data? I think that's a big issue for many organizations.
Obviously, I think that is where it started, the logic of the ESG. Now, ESG has different type of framework which you can choose. And Renu had just mentioned that our BUSA Malaysia in the year 2023 has actually set out a requirement is to adopt the TCFD framework to measure the climate-related financial reporting disclosure. But if you look into the word ESG itself, what does ESG stand for? Three important aspects of sustainability, and not just talking about a financial or environmental perspective. And this is where I'm coming from, that there is still a silent G, which a lot of stakeholders are still not moving out, getting into it, and to share and tell the public what are these G is about. Moreover, we are talking about disclosing a non-financial ESG report. I don't know why you have to emphasize the word financial reporting in that angle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Loy. And a final question, we've got 1 minute. I'm going to end with Paul. Paul, a question to you. You participate a lot on the global stage. How does Malaysia fare in terms of its approach to corporate governance on a global, compared with the global markets?
Malaysia as a country, we are still a developing country, right? And we are a supply chain to many of these developed countries in terms of products that we send to them, right? We are well aware of the changing marketplace, and Malaysia is one of the signatories to the Climate Accord, Paris Climate Accord. So we are complying with that. Okay, but I think from the board perspective, many of the board members, whether public company, especially private company, the smaller company, they don't see that this issue of reporting is really sort of beneficial, or they cannot see the performance, the real value of it. They consider this, if the regulators ask them to comply, well, we have no choice, you know, they just have to comply, all right? But on the other hand, I think the approach that we have to apply to this local industry is to really spend more time in helping them to understand the value proposition of implementation of sustainability and issue of ESG. As Dr. Loy rightly pointed out, climate is one key element. In fact, because of all this climate, the global climate initiative, this has pushed to the forefront. But for a company as a whole, financial, whether you like it or not, this is the lifeline or the lifeblood of a company, right? They have to perform. Right. If you don't have a cash flow 1-2 years, you probably have to close down. That's why the recent lockdown, many companies are affected. Okay, so where I'm coming from is that we have to bring forth to the industry the value proposition. That's I'm very much inclined to the integrated reporting, integrated value creation, integrated thinking, because the whole thing that we are looking at as the board of directors, to discharge of fiduciary responsibility, we have to look at the overall of the company to ensure the company is healthy, performing well, which ensure the company has a good cash flow and all the other assets that make the company move forward. Right. So this part, I think, is not have not really been sort of emphasized very much. So most of the companies have to comply, they do it, you know, but they don't really value it.
Okay. Thank you so much. I know we've run out of time, so thank you to everyone who stayed online. Just to finish off, I think that was a great end statement. Thank you so much, Dr. Loy. Thank you, Renu. Thank you so much, Paul, for arranging us to just get a little bit of an insight into governance in Malaysia. Thank you, everyone. Our next event is governance in the UK and the United Kingdom, and that's happening on the 6th of December, and we'll be sending out a notification on that. Thank you very much, everyone.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All the best. Take care.